Welcome into the Illini Inquirer Podcast and our live YouTube channel. It's Jeremy Werner back at Illinois and Derek Piper up in Madison, Wisconsin, where this was an old school whooping from Wisconsin up in the Kohl Center. Illinois' 9-game win streak snapped as Wisconsin, man, they are red hot. They're making a run at the Big Ten Championship. John Tonje, 31 points, making a run at Big Ten Player of the Year. That's a team that looks dangerous, while Illinois looks like it's limping to the finish, both kind of literally and figuratively. Mraz Johnson Jr. out for this one with the broken wrist. And, of course, Thomas Avicic, we find out, is sick again. I don't know what's going through this team, but, boy, they cannot shake any of the sickness. So they didn't even shake hands at the end of the game. Derek, you knew once this tipped off and Illinois didn't have a starting center that Jake Davis and Trey White were starters in this one. Ben-Hum Rickhouse was jumping for the tip-off. Felt like Illinois didn't have much of a chance, and that proved to be true.
Right, yeah, they did hang in there for a half, which you give them credit for battling, and they made some threes actually there in that first half to hang tough. It was just kind of the writing was on the wall. This team's not going to be able to get enough stops over the course of 40 minutes, and that Wisconsin was going to flirt, as they did, with scoring 100, and they fall just a little bit short there. And then Illinois offensively just can't sustain and can't really hang tough punch for punch with a team that is, of course, at full strength, playing really good basketball in Wisconsin. And just kind of big picture, I didn't like this game, even if Tommy didn't have another sickness, even if Mraz was in this game. I think it would have been obviously a more interesting battle because the physicality up front could have presented something that Wisconsin has had a tough time matching up with at times. But just who Illinois is right now, an inconsistent team, an inexperienced team, going on the road, not being able to, within a game, sustain across a really good effort for 40 minutes. And Wisconsin's a really well-coached team, a smart team. They've blended really well their offense with great three-point shooting at multiple positions. Really, they can stretch you out all five in a lot of their lineups. We saw Crowell hit, of course, a season-high 3 threes tonight. And then Tonje's one of the best players in the country right now. Blackwell's a downhill force and just a really good all-around player. And, yeah, Illinois ran into a buzzsaw, and it doesn't help that they are not at full strength with Mraz out. Just the tough breaks at this point have just gotten ridiculous for Illinois. And you can't control it. I mean, you can't control that Tommy got mono and that he's driving up separate today after Brad said he got 2.5 IVs. And then came up separate and tried to go. And I really appreciate the effort and the toughness that Tommy has. But I do think, and admittedly, as somebody that's here watching it and here trying to cover it and here asking Brad questions about it, it is a little frustrating to try to understand that from the Illinois side of it, from Brad's answers, from the players, you're not going to get a whole lot. It is just they're sick and that they're just trying to survive, which that is definitely a big story here. But there are some flaws that have continued to show themselves over this stretch. I mean, they're 5-7 over the last 12 games. And we've talked about here recently the defense is outside the top 100 over the last month. They're not getting nearly enough stops. And KJ has a rough game tonight. It's a freshman that is still way too up and down, especially one that is a projected top 5 pick. And, yeah, and the schedule's not getting any easier. So there's that too. So you're just trying to survive right now and see if this stretch doesn't consume you and it doesn't gobble you up.
Yeah, it's a scary point, right? Because two things can be true, Derek. Injuries and illness have had a huge impact on this team. That is simply fair. Like, it is hard to get a rhythm as a team, to put good stretches of basketball together, to be cohesive when you've had 7 different starting lineups in the last 11 games, mostly because of injuries and illness. But it's also fair to say I saw an unbelievably connected and confident team in Wisconsin. I saw a team that had all the answers. I saw a team that looked like from the tip, Derek, was the aggressor, was the better team. Now, obviously, on the interior, Illinois had a huge disadvantage. But then the other group looked tentative, kind of winging it offensively, just kind of, avant-garde, just kind of, didn't have a lot of connectedness or purpose. While Wisconsin felt like it did. And of course, they have a star, 24-year-old John Tonje that's been an unbelievable player. But it's starting to feel like this experiment is just not working, that this experiment of this roster is not working. And it's just been obviously made worse by these injuries and illness, but you have young guys that are playing like young guys. Kasparas Jakcionis was awful tonight. And we got a bunch of messages on here, we'll get to it, that's saying he's not a lottery pick. Listen, ESPN is saying he's a lottery pick, and he still is projected to be that. He played like a lottery pick for what, 70 of the previous 80 minutes, but the last 30 minutes he has not, right? Last, I guess, 50 minutes he has not, but he had 2 3/4 really good games before that where he combined for 60 points during that time. He's a really, really talented player, but he just has these moments where it's just complete collapse and, tries to do too much, and it consumes him and he can't get out of it. It reminds me of quicksand from the Replacements. Like, he just gets in that quicksand, tries to fight out of it, and it just makes it worse. And he hurts his team, and he hurt his team tonight. But the bigger story, Derek, might be the transfers have not worked out. This has been a poor transfer haul. You look at Tonje and what he's added to that team and how great of an evaluation that is. And I look at Illinois and I'm like, Jake Davis might be the best evaluation when you think about return on investment. Ben Hummerkus had a decent night tonight, especially in that first half, 13 points. He's overwhelmed defensively, but he's battling. Kylan Boswell's not making an impact. Trey White plays tonight. He had 7 points, but it wasn't a very good night for him either. And it's just a team that has no leadership. And they tried to mix those young guys, the talent that has been the most promising thing of this year. But the transfers have not given them the floor that they need to survive when KJ has one of these 18-year-old games.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. And Joey and I were discussing as we were driving up today, and we'll still see how close to whole this team can get by the finish line, where they're at, where their seed positioning is, and whether they can make some noise. And there's still, I think, milestones that they could reasonably hit. There are teams that get hot at the right time, matchups. Obviously, Illinois has their talent play up to a certain level, and we can probably feel like it's a satisfying enough result. As of right now, it doesn't look like they're going to hit that. There's presented a lot of doubt that they will play well enough. That they are. I think we're all beyond the consistency part. I mean, can they win 2 games in a row in the tournament? And obviously, they're going to pull a big upset probably in the second round to just get to a Sweet 16, which I think would be a big deal. Back-to-back Sweet 16s. We'll see what that looks like, because in the immediate, Duke is Duke, and you kind of catch a break with Iowa, but there are no guarantees with that. And the last 2 are difficult, obviously Michigan and Purdue. But on that note with Michigan, I mean, Vlad Golden, you had the connection, obviously, with Dusty May, Danny Wolf. Not that they were the only team that felt like he was a really good player. Illinois would have loved to have him. They really, really liked him and tried to he was on the no contact list. They were putting an effort in there, but just seemed like he was destined for Michigan. That's a great eval. That's a portal hit that it hit, and it mixed well with who they had, and obviously he's thrived. And Illinois did spectacular work in the portal the previous year. What the mask was, Guerrier in a role that he came into, and that was something that was
for a time Justin Harmon.
Right,
pretty solid for them.
Right. I'm with you. And we talked about a little before hopping on this. It will be interesting in terms of, are you still big game hunting in Europe? Are you trying to have some of your best players, your highest ceiling players, be young European guys? And it wouldn't even just have to be Euros. It could just be, whether it was like a Costanza from, a reclass again, similar to Will Riley or something like that from the U.S. side of things. Would you look for like a freshman one and done or 2 of those again? I don't think there's anything wrong with that formula, because, I mean, just look at the Michigan State game. Your young players were your best things going. Like KJ has had moments where he's been awesome, obviously, and he's had a really good season on the whole. Yes, it's not been without blemishes, and when he's really struggled, I mean, 7 turnovers in 3 different games is really hard to overcome. But Will doing what he's doing of late, Merez, who he was, Tommy as a younger, like, the problem has been, like you said, the transfers that they've essentially gotten disappointing efforts out of, if not flat out just missed. And I think if they go back to the portal looking for role players, it's going to be important. And I'll be interested what they identify too, Jeremy. I think that they obviously prioritize skill and shot making, which it hasn't played out where this has been a very good shot making team. But will Brad want more toughness? Because I think that's something this team lacks. This is turned into, and it definitely is without Morez Johnson, much more of a finesse team than a physical team. And Brad has wanted usually that really gritty, really hungry, really, who plays harder than us, Illinois. Like, that's not this team. It's not. No. And is that going to change?
Which I find this all fascinating, because this was an experiment for Brad, right? Like last year, he had Terrence Shannon Jr., but that wasn't like otherwise an overwhelmingly talented skill. But Marcus Domask was a phenomenal eval. You were big with obviously Quincy Guerrier, Coleman Hawkins, obviously a very skilled player, but it was just a nice mix of that. This was all basically skill, but then you added Trey White and Kylan Boswell to kind of be your grit, right? And be your consistent toughness. They just haven't really done that consistently. The two guys who have done it consistently for me are Morez Johnson Jr., who you sorely miss. And that was one of the biggest things I thought of when they lost him is, of course, the rebounding, of course, the physicality. But for me, it was just the toughness, right? And the tenacity. You're missing that because Ty Rodgers isn't on the court. He's got a lot of flaws otherwise, but you don't have him on the court. But Dra Gibbs-Lawhorn's the one who consistently gives you that kind of edge. And obviously, he's a huge bright spot tonight. 17 points, 15 of it in the second half. He had 5 assists in this game, 4 rebounds, was almost the lead for this team from your 6-foot guard. So if I'm Brad the rest of the way, I think Dre's got to start. Make him a big part of your team, because it's the kind of guy I want in my program. And it's a guy that I think is going to consistently give it. And based on what Kylan's doing right now, I think Dra deserves more minutes. Kylan has not given them that consistent edge that we saw early in the year. And that's why it's frustrating, even with this entire team, is you saw it in the first 15 games of the year. And it's not just injuries and illness for me, right? It's just this edge. Just feels like a team that just ran into a wall. And you wonder with some of these guys, are they willing to pick themselves back up and fight again? So for the rest of the year, I just want to side with the guys who are going to do that. Like Jake Davis, Dra Gibbs-Lawhorn. I feel like we're going to do that. Tommy, kudos to him. Like the fact that he was battling the way he did. So that's what Brad Underwood, I think, is got to find more than anything down the stretch. Because it's just a team that's limping to the finish. I think both obviously physically, but also mentally, does this team have it in them to fight back?
And that's kind of what you're looking for when your backs are against the wall is, can you, maybe when you're shorthanded, when you're outgunned, can you just want it more? Can you fight more? Do you have just more of that want to than another team or whatever it is? Play your hearts out. And Brad even said it tonight, and even DGL echoed it. Kind of the way they're looking at the Duke game is David versus Goliath, which is interesting because Illinois was planning at this point in the season to be a Goliath in their own right, which they're not. And that's, like you said, not just sickness, not just availability of certain guys in and out of the lineup. That's just a team that is inconsistent and has not performed up to par, and has really performed like prior. I'm not going to erase away what they built in the first 2.5 months of this year, but since then, since early to mid-January, they've performed like a bubble team, obviously. And I know that people are worried that they will get to that point. I still don't think that will happen.
They still got a long way to go, but there's at least this little, could they lose out?
The Iowa game is the tell, right? If they lose that at home, then maybe there's all bets that are off at that point.
Right.
But, I think with Will Riley, we saw Illinois really pour into say, okay, you're ready for more opportunity. We'll ride some of the wave with you. But I think you double down on Will, and I want to see it double down on DGL. I think he's earned it. And you go back at what his resume was prior to getting the flu, and I've written about it a couple different times, and the rotation and whatnot is, the previous, from the new year up until getting the flu, he was like a 23-minute per game guy, 10 points per game, shooting nearly 50% from the field. And then you just get the intangible, just plays insanely hard, has passion, has grit to him. I want that on my team. Not only this year, I want that on my team next year. I'm thinking about,
yes,
it's got to be a thought, right?
Well, and that's why even in the off season, like, listen, I get the idea of adding somebody with a little bit more offensive skill like Trey White, but I like a Ty Rodgers on my team, flaws and all. I just love a guy, and I know Brad does too, that just plays so damn hard and can provide some leadership. And hey, they found a Jake Davis who might be as good as a Luke Goody, right? And is here for 3 more years. So kudos for that. But it's just, I think that continuity still matters. Having a couple of those guys. I know Imani Hansberry moves on. I think you upgraded with Thomas Vicic and Morez Johnson, but it's just some of that matters. And again, I know we're doing the big picture questions, but I think it applies. I'm wondering how Brad responds to this year, right? And the choices they made to go talent and skill over some of those intangible things.
I agree with you. Yeah, it's kind of gotten me into, I don't know if I'm just running into a bunch of Rick Pitino, things on social media. I did love his locker room thing when they're down. It was the Providence game, and he's like, I don't care if we're making shots, play effing defense. How are you guys not tough and whatnot? And really, that squad doesn't shoot the ball well, but they are just ferocious defensively, and they do have that hard hat, lunch pail, kind of what we got to know Brad Underwood's teams to have. Not that they didn't have offensive ability with Io and Trent and obviously Kofi inside, but I wonder if Brad wants to recapture some of that. And I'm sure he'll try to balance it. I'm sure he'll try to thread the needle of we still want to and know how important offense is and how important skill is and floor spacing and whatnot. But it might be a pushback on, we can't just go all analytics. We can't just go all skill and whatnot, finesse. We got to have some grit to us, and we've missed some of that. So I think that's a very interesting thing to evaluate. But with DGL, he's a guy that flat out said that. I appreciate his honesty. He's like, I've been frustrated that I didn't get minutes here recently. He's like, I felt better after I didn't play Minnesota or barely played Minnesota. So I felt better by the UCLA game. I really didn't play in that game, barely played in Michigan State. And he's like, I've been frustrated. And he had the kind of the cryptic, what does this picture mean tweet? And I don't want to lose that guy. On the note of continuity, you don't want to like cater to players so much that you're worrying so much about, will this guy leave? Will they not? So I'm going to give him minutes this way. Like, you don't want to be that way. But not only like should you want him for that, he just deserved to play flat out. So yeah. I wouldn't want to mess with that, and hopefully he does just get those opportunities here forward.
Yeah, I thought Will had some really good moments as a lead guard when KJ was just inexcusable turnovers. I don't know if it was because Tommy was out and the other guys just weren't looking for the ball in some of those pick and pops, but I mean, he dribbled a couple off his legs, and then obviously he just threw the ball away several times. But then Will came in and kind of kept Illinois in this game. Dre comes in, hits a couple threes, makes some shots. So those guys really were the bright spots. And then Ben made some big threes that were nice, but wasn't much else out of that one. Did we learn? I don't know if you guys had the chance to ask, because I know you only get a couple questions. Do we know what happened with Jake Davis in this game?
Yeah, they said that they noticed in pregame that he was sick. That he still wanted to play. He started, and then he went to the locker room to throw up, and that he was puking through halftime and decided not to come out.
Jeez.
So they did not shake hands with Wisconsin to not give them sickness. Brad, we did get to talk to a couple of the players, which how lucky we are as media people here in person about hazmat suits. We didn't talk to Jake, but
man, we're all on a flight together on Friday to New York City, too.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
But yes, I agree with you. Dre, Morez, Jake Davis, Tomislav, mean, obviously, if you can get Will Riley back, that'd be phenomenal. But those are the guys I want to kind of keep feeding to.
Who you prioritize, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about KJ. We got a lot of comments on this. I understand. CJ, Jeremy, quit telling me KJ is a lottery pick. Lottery picks don't play this poorly this often. From what everyone is saying, the lottery picks must be the entire first round. Too many players being taken. Leroy, CJ, I agree with you. KJ is definitely not a lottery pick. He needs another year to develop along with Will. KJ will be disappointed when he doesn't get picked in the first round. Derek.
Spicy.
I mean, Jonathan Gravoni, ESPN, has him number 5 in his latest mock draft. I can agree with people if they want to say his stock has taken a hit with, the last month and a half of his season has not been as dominant, but I still think he's shown so much, including Minnesota was pretty awesome. I know Minnesota's not great, Derek. UCLA, he dominated, right? And then Michigan State for 30 minutes, I thought he was the best player on the court. And then he had a bad last 10 minutes of that game. I don't want to forget about those things. But yes, tonight was atrocious. The end of the Michigan State game was atrocious. And Will stepped up, but you really needed Kylan to step up in some of those moments where he was really struggling. But Kylan's 7 points, 3 of 9 shooting, 3 turnovers, 10 turnovers from your 2 starting guards tonight compared to 2 assists. Terrible.
It's really bad. Yeah, and some of the turnovers are just so sloppy. And it is a young player that has a lot on his plate. And that's not to excuse it. Like, he has to be better. He has to be better. He's gotten whatever it is at this point, 20-some games under his belt at this level. And you do see when Tommy's not out there and the ball's not going through him maybe as much on the offensive end, that the press that can take pressure off of KJ playmaking wise. But then again, I watched Will Riley tonight. Will Riley was far more efficient with the ball security, getting where he wanted to, getting to his spots, and not just being a turnover machine tonight, which KJ's had a couple of those moments. Yes, against some good defenses at times. You look at Tennessee, that was a situation where that's a great turnover defense, very physical. Wisconsin is not a defense that turns you over. They just don't. That's not one of their makeups. That they have a skill at doing. So it was just something where he was not valuing the basketball, not learning from his mistakes. And but yes, I mean, he still had the numbers are still really, really good for an 18-year-old. People are drafting. I feel like we do this once every time we do this, or once a week. Like,
drafting. They're taken in the first round does not mean they're ready to make first round impacts in the NBA. And I think he's going to have some things to deal with in the NBA, but it's all about upside. And we've seen the upside. I mean, he's still, Derek, having one of the best freshman seasons we've ever seen.
Right. He is, no doubt.
But the downs are downs, right? Like, there's a lot of downs.
Sure. And there are different points of reference. I wrote it recently that over the last 10 games, he's shooting 20 to 21% off the dribble. And so when he's taking those step-back shots, those aren't high-quality shots, according to what the numbers say. Yes, the turnover rate is really, really high. I don't want to pretend like I have, numerous or any NBA GMs on speed dial. I don't. I don't know if, as the mocks catch up and as the big boards catch up, like we did see Will Riley have a significant drop at one point in the schedule when he was really struggling. He went from like a consistently mid first round guy outside of or at the very end of the first round, and obviously has trended back up. It wouldn't shock me if the next update, whether it's later in February or early March, says he's not a top 5 pick anymore. Yeah. I'd still expect him to very much be firmly in the lottery. He'd have to continue to really struggle. But this is one that Brad was on him. He was on him hard. That was probably as hard as I've seen him coach KJ in a game, and at one point told Keaton Kutcher to take his warm-up off and go into the game for KJ, and then thought better of it, or quote-unquote better of it. He decided not to do it, and him and Tyler had a little bit of a back and forth into that timeout, and I think they decided not to go in that direction. But he was trying to hold him accountable, and I think that fans will think that should have happened sooner, and that it should continue to happen. You've got to put him on the bench when he's doing that.
No, absolutely. After his 7th turnover that led to a layup, he called a timeout, and he said something with his wife in the background. And you could see his wife raise her eyebrows like that. So something was said right there. Derek says NBAmockdraft.net is way better than ESPN. Check the records. NBAdraft.net, I've been going to that site for 25, 30 years. Love it. They have Kasparas number 8, by the way. So that's the low person right there. All right, Derek. Now they just got to play one of the best teams in the country in Duke.
Yeah, no big deal.
With one of the best front courts in the country. Obviously, Cooper Flagg is just an animal. And without Morez Johnson, he's going to go off. They have a lottery pick big man. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but a lot of people have him. Malawach. It's going to probably be pretty ugly in Madison Square Garden. You need Thomas Slavovicic to feel healthy, and you need Kasparas Jakcionis back on track, and you need to hand some keys to Dra Gibbs-Lawhorn and Will Riley a little bit more.
I agree, no doubt. I think the theme is going to be pretty consistent in some of these matchups, especially without Morez and against teams that got. I mean, Duke has a ton of size. They don't. I don't think they start anybody shorter than 6'5". So that they're on the perimeter very big. Cooper Flagg is you don't have one of those. Not many teams do in terms of a good matchup.
NBA teams don't have one of those.
Yeah, exactly, right. But even as you look down, you look to Michigan and Wolf and Golden, and like just some of these are going to be really tough. And then you deal with Braden Smith and everything he can do setting the table. But yeah, I mean, number one, I think Duke's going to have a very significant advantage with the crowd. I'm assuming they're going to, that East Coast team, they're going to probably have a huge crowd. Not that that's going to swing it, or they would need that. One thing, if there is and this is kind of very, although I would have looked at this if Tommy was okay and Jake Davis wasn't throwing up at halftime, and then who knows who the heck's going to get it next. And I do like that. If I'm Illinois, I like that Duke has only played one Ken Palm top 25 team since Christmas, and they lost to him in Clemson. Yeah. So they're in this streak of
bubble, right? Like they're just
it's disgusting. They played Virginia, who's awful. They played Stanford. They played Cal. They have played a cupcake schedule here recently, and maybe, just maybe, they've gotten a little comfortable. But also, then again, it's a national TV. They're going to have probably a bunch of NBA scouts, and Illinois right now is an easy target, and one that's not playing very well and is not fully healthy. So. And to go back to, I know some people are mad that we're not being maybe hard enough on this team or Brad or whatnot.
We said this experiment is failed.
Yeah, right, exactly. Watching Wisconsin, I went back and watched the Wisconsin Purdue. They look so, like you said, in sync, well coached, good ball movement, player movement, a high IQ basketball team. A lot of those things I can't say about Illinois. I think you watched their offense tonight. There's a lot of standing around, a lot of ISO basketball. What are you trying to accomplish? And then defensively, they don't have a lot of bite. They don't have a lot of things that contribute to getting stops. And but I think offensively that is something tonight that did stand out.
Yeah, we kind of said that early, and it's just like that looked like a team that, kind of looked like Illinois last year, right? It was just connected, well constructed, the offense fit. Kind of, Greg Gard, kudos to him for, kind of making some changes, the NBA game, and finding a guy like Tonje, surrounding him with shooters, and he's got big guards who can kind of bully you. But I understand you're lacking up front, but there was just a bite to him tonight, where it's like they were in control from the tip. They were confident, while Illinois felt like outside of Jake Davis to start that game, it was just kind of like, all right, is anyone really confident here? Like Kylan Boswell's passing up open shots. Can't have it. While Wisconsin just bombs away and making smart decisions and making great passes. And it was just a clear difference.
Yeah. And for Gard, to do all this, and of course the outside perception of AJ Storr, how much that's changed in a year.
We saw in Minneapolis, I was like, yeah, throw a bunch of money at him. Right.
100%. I was all over that. A mill, that's fine. That's probably, market value or whatever. He was at the very least one of the best scorers in the Big Ten, who still had 2 years of eligibility left. Chucky's their starting point guard, who's experienced. And they lost Tyler Wall, who didn't have a very good year last year, but they've added shooting. They're a lot better. They're a tougher team this year than they were previously. You look at their rebounding numbers, their at the rim defense is much better. And man, the shooting across the board has been impressive. So they've done some really good things with that. And, seeing Brad tonight, which how could you not? I mean, Tonje, him and Terrence Shannon aren't the same player, but he's kind of sitting there like, hey, it's nice to have a 23, 24-year-old. We know what that was like last year. And
that's your decision.
Fill in the blank. Does that mean – is that what you're going for?
Yeah.
Going into next year? I don't know. But Duke's Duke, a lot of people through the year, are they the best defensive team in college basketball? That's a scary thought for what Illinois, what their recent form is and what they're about to go up against.
Derek, what Illinois really needs to focus on is how to make sure Josh Dix and Peyton Sanford don't go off, right? Like that is because Iowa does not have size, right? They're out their big man, Owen Freeman, who might have played his last game in an Iowa uniform. And but they can make threes, and we know they can get hot, but they don't play defense. Got to win that game. Really got to win that game. And then you find a way. Purdue is in a 3-game losing streak, which really opens up this battle. Michigan State looked really good tonight, but it's Michigan, Michigan State, Wisconsin right now in that Big Ten title race. I guess I shouldn't count Purdue yet, but they don't look talented enough, to be honest with you, outside of Braden Smith. And Trey Kaufman-Ren's a good player, but their supporting pieces haven't played well enough. So it looks like a 3-team race in that Big Ten, but Illinois just got to get another win to make sure they get into this tournament and just stop the bleeding, because it looks like it's going to continue on Saturday. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I think it is something, of course, wins or losses are what is going to get charted on a resume and whatnot. But I think it is something that you can learn about the character of this team and who you can kind of try to follow the lead of. Maybe, Ben said tonight, Dre is kind of becoming a leader for this team. I'm adding in this part of it. Like, maybe if this continues for Dre, like let's have him be somebody that is a guy standing up in the locker room, is a guy that we are maybe starting and following the lead of. And maybe when it gets to a point where Tommy's healthier and this team comes together, like when you get into March, where are you looking? Who is Brad trusting? When things aren't perfect, who actually answered the bell and still played hard, still played tough, still got it done. But you just hope for a competitive game against Duke. Of course, you prepare for, you try to go win the game, and you still could. You never know what could happen in college basketball. But, yeah, have some things to try to get healthy as much as possible and maybe have some things to build on going into Iowa. And Brad did finish with Scott Ritchie asked a fine question of, what are you guys doing to stop this, like sickness-wise?
Legit question.
And he's like, apparently we haven't done a good enough job in our building. He's like, maybe it's the apartments situation. He's like,
let's go back to COVID protocols here.
Yeah, right. He's like, this is a different variant of the flu that we had previously. The other one was like the aches and the fevers, and this is the throwing up in the stomach. And like, you just can't make this stuff up, man. So there is that, but also Brad seemed to only want to talk about that in the post game, and but as obviously we've gone 30-some minutes, there's a lot more to look at too.
All right, that'll wrap it up. Thank you to everyone for watching live on our YouTube channel. We appreciate you guys. Hit that like button, subscribe to us, and hit that notifications bell. Derek and Joey Wagner will have plenty more from Madison. I'll have the player grades. Not very high grades here for this game. I'll tease that. But then we're all heading out to New York City because it's a game at Madison Square Garden. It's the number 1 pick in the draft. Derek, any final thoughts before we get out?
I don't know. I've noticed that I've had some people in the doorway. I don't know if they're
going to kick you out. That's
they were going to grab me just pull my chair out into the hallway and be like, "You're out of here, man." But no, not really. Look, Wisconsin, I think is a team that can really go on a run in March. The way that this is trending, and Illinois, barring a significant change, looks like they'll be lucky just to get into the tournament in one piece. But we'll see. We'll see where this goes. You never know. But it's not looking good.
I forgot to do this. Cubs fan 7. If they 599 super chat, thank you, Cubs fan. If they stay the Euro route, need to focus on athleticism. 3-and-D guys. Team is slow. Could use a Miles Kelly type. Don't need a Ben or Davis type. Yeah, they need to get more athletic. That's for sure.
Yeah, Miles Kelly was a guy that they looked into. He ended up at Auburn. Good player out of Georgia Tech, no doubt. I know that Dame Sarr, who they're as far as Euros, Italy, good athlete. 6'7", probably a better. He's slender. He's slender, and that's something that obviously with Will Riley that you went up against as well. So I think within athleticism, you obviously want some more maybe strength to it as well. But I think it's a fair point. I think blending some of that skill and shooting with some real
SEC athletes.
That's about as well as I could have said it. Yeah. And TJ was a SEC, if not just like an NBA player playing in college last year. And you don't quite have that this year. Derek,
safe travels, man. Appreciate you hopping on.
Always fun, man. Even when it doesn't feel like it.
Guys, we're here for you regardless. Thank you for everybody for listening to the Illini Inquirer Podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube. Hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell. Everyone have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time on the Illini Inquirer Podcast.